Yo, what is going on YouTube? I am Germ here. This is kind of a couple days old at this point. EnderCasts, this little Twitter rant he went on, it was September 22nd, so 4 days ago, about all this fallout surrounding the Samira release, people being upset about it, people kind of calling out the playtesters and Riot being like, what in the heck are you guys doing? None of this makes sense. How did this champion go through months and months and months of playtesting and still get released in this state with all these problems and this just terrible balance state? EnderCasts, he's obviously a color caster for the LEC. I guess he's a freelance caster, which doesn't really work for Riot necessarily, but Riot brings him on as a contracted worker. So he can kind of say whatever he wants. This isn't really Riot's perspective. This is just one individual's perspective. But I kind of just wanted to respond to a lot of things that he said because I know a lot of people are upset with what he's saying and don't completely agree with it. I think there's some good and bad things that he says, but a lot of this stuff is interesting and at least worth being talked about. So again, even though it's a couple days old, hopefully this stuff is still relevant and still interesting because again, the Samira release was a huge deal and now we've had a couple days to kind of digest everything and see how it's going. So first up, if you haven't seen these tweets, EnderCast kind of had this like rant thread talking about it's sad seeing people bash on champ design every new release. The champion team creates a champion that is fresh, rewarding to play as and against. Balance team has to get it close to balance before release, knowing that its win rate will increase 10% or more over the first patch. So a lot of things here. It is hard for the balance team for sure. You know, yes, Riot is trying to create completely new, fresh ideas. That will add something new to the game, also get people excited about it and playing it, because there's no point in just releasing a champion that doesn't push the limits, that isn't exciting, that isn't fun, isn't at least a little bit broken in some ways, especially at the beginning, since they're creating something completely new that people don't necessarily know how to play against, know how to handle, know how to account for. If they were just releasing cookie cutter champions that everyone was like, oh, that's not completely broken, I completely understand that from the first day, that would be boring. So I agree, this job is hard, they're trying to do something very difficult. And for the most part, they do a good job. Champions will be released overpowered because people associate fun with winning. If your champion releases at 35% win rate, even if that is long-term balance when looking at a mastery curve, champions player will never recover. I get it, but this is something I don't completely agree with. I know I've heard like I Will Dominate say that Yasuo had like a 35% win rate on release. These crazy outplay champions like Samira, like Riven, Yasuo, these big like montage champions, they should have a lower win rate on release, and people will still play them. If they're the fun, exciting champions like Yone, he could have been however bad on release, as long as he was relatively balanced, people are still going to play him. He has an interesting kit, he's fun, he's exciting, and if he's strong enough to where if you start to master him, he can get good, then people are going to give it a chance. If you really do release a balanced champion, if you're so good at playtesting or developing champions or whatever, that you can create a balanced champion, it has a 35% win rate on release, but it's hard to play, I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I know I heard LS talking about, you know, like if Set comes out with 35% win rate, that's a problem because there's not that much you can do with Set. But if Yone comes out with a 35% release or Samira, then maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room because these are champions that need tens, if not hundreds of games to really start to perfect and master. So I don't agree that a champions player will never recover. Maybe it won't recover in the short term, but in the long term, especially if it gets buffed and stuff, it'll always work out. And it is hard. Do you aim for 50% win rate on the first patch and have to nerf down, or do you aim for like a 35% win rate on the first patch and have to buff up? You can really go either way. It's kind of personal preference. Obviously, people don't want to play against an overpowered champion, but people also don't want a completely useless champion that can't even be played. So that is hard. Another thing is I see, what are the playtesters doing? They suck at their job. So first of all the playtesters are phenomenal, and they're all high diamond to challenger. It is good that they're all high elo, obviously, but that doesn't mean they're good at their job. There's, I'm sure, plenty of high diamond, master, grandmaster, challenger players who would be terrible playtesters, who have no idea what they're doing, who don't have the right mind or thinking or whatever. And I'm sure there's some people in maybe even plat or low diamond or high diamond that could be an amazing playtester, who could do a really, really good job. I think being good at the game and being able to playtest and understand game design and champion interaction, all that stuff, yeah, it probably skews towards being higher elo, but higher elo doesn't make you good at it necessarily. It's not a catch-all for every high elo player. Could make a phenomenal playtester. And also it doesn't mean, even if you are a good playtester, that you can't make mistakes and that you shouldn't be held accountable for mistakes. Because I think when you look at the release of Samira, there's no way to say that it wasn't a mistake and it wasn't a complete oversight by Riot and so many of the playtesters. And I think they are deserving of some criticism. Obviously not horrible things being said to them on Twitter or Reddit or whatever, and not tons of flame or whatever, but some accountability is necessary because something went wrong here, and it's something that needs to be addressed so it doesn't happen again or it doesn't continue to happen in the future. And I don't think we need to be so defensive about that. I think we can say that if someone does a bad job, you can call them out and you can say your thoughts and opinions, especially on an open public forum like Twitter, without having to even be a good playtester. You don't have to be high elo or a good playtester or a playtester at all to see something went wrong with the Samira release, something went wrong with the Samira playtesting, and somewhere in the system of playtesting and champion design and all that, something needs to be fixed, or somebody needs to be held accountable for this, or at least somebody needs to admit a mistake was made and show how it's not going to happen again, at least for players to have that peace of mind. If you don't think players need that or deserve that or whatever, that's fine, but don't just say, oh, the playtesters are all amazing, they did a great job, and this was good, this is a good release, because that's just not true. Second, playtesters have a few different jobs during the lifespan of a champion. I don't think this stuff's as interesting. He gets to the end here, which I think is a little bit of the weird part of the tweets to me. TLDR, champ design, balance, playtesting are all hard jobs. Completely agree. 99% of you would all be awful at them. This is what I have a problem with. I think this is really, really weird and comes out pretty aggressive and attacking in a way. Because again, I don't agree with the people who are attacking playtesters and Riot and casters or whoever on Twitter. But that doesn't mean we should fight stupid with stupid and be like, oh, I guarantee you 99% of you would be bad. Because, I guess it's easy to say. I think a lot of people are bad at a lot of jobs. That doesn't defend what the playtester did. Doesn't depend what Riot did. It doesn't defend how the Samira release went, and it also doesn't. It's not just productive at all in this conversation of how are we going to do better, what things can we change, how can we make the next release smooth better, and how can we reflect on this whole thing as what went wrong here. And I think this coming from a prominent person in the League of Legends scene, even though he's not a direct Riot employee, he's for sure connected to Riot, has an opinion that people see and hear and stuff. I think that's a really bad statement. I think it's you need a little bit better PR than that. And I think it's really, really weird to just be like, oh, you guys are all idiots. The playtesting team is great, and 99% of you would suck at it. Again, you don't have to be good at playtesting to be able to say that the Samira playtesting they did a bad job this time and they need to do better. So I think this is a weird tweet. Give them a chance. They all want to make the game better because they love the game as much or more than you. Okay, that's great. I think, again, to say they love the game a lot, I don't think you need to say more than people. Give them a chance. I definitely agree. But I don't agree with this whole tweet. I think there's definitely some weird parts. Something I find hilarious about this whole conversation is if we scroll down here a little bit, Ender actually says how he was a playtester during the Arden censor meta, which I think could explain a lot of this, because obviously the Arden censor meta was another time where the playtesters did a very bad job. That was a terrible Worlds patch, and it ruined a huge international tournament. It ruined a meta for quite some time and ruined the viewing experience of a lot of people. So I just think it's hilarious that Ender throws this in here, that he was a playtester during the Arden meta, because if I was trying to make a case about how the playtesting team is good and how you shouldn't bash them and how you guys would all be terrible at it, and I know what I'm talking about and I was an amazing playtester, I wouldn't include that I was a member of the playtesting team during the Arden censor meta. I think that seems like some information that the public could go without, but I just thought that was really, really hilarious that he felt the need to throw that in, because obviously that whole thing was a mess as well. He does bring up some good points, obviously, and I do agree with a lot of what he's saying, that target win rate is going to be somewhere between 38 to 54%, which is a huge range. Obviously, Riot needs to pick one end of that range to go for, knowing that it'll go up over time. That's the hard part, that when you release a champion, no one's ever played it, nobody's ever played against it, so it's going to feel broken, it's going to feel overpowered, but it's also going to feel underwhelming in the hands of people, because they don't really know what they're doing. But yeah, playtesting is a hard job. Riot seems to constantly be flip-flopping between we want to release 50% win rates champions at launch so we actually get good numbers and stats and everything about them, which is a fair argument. If nobody plays a champion, it's hard to get numbers on them, and if they're so bad that nobody wants to play them, that can be difficult. But if you make them so overpowered that they're just completely broken on release, then it feels like, you're trying to just sell a bunch of skins and sell a bunch of champions and stuff, and then you're going to nerf it and just take that completely away from people, and they kind of get bamboozled. It's a fine line to walk. It's really, really hard. But again, I also agree with the sentiment that in a couple months, Riot's going to balance its champion. None of it's going to matter. Everyone's going to forget about this. In the end, it's just going to be a crazy couple of days, maybe even a crazy week or couple of weeks. And ultimately, it won't matter. This is going to keep happening where they're going to release champions. It's very hard to know exactly what champions are going to happen on release, because no matter how good your playtesters are, no matter what your playtesting team does, they're only going to be able to play hundreds, thousands of games, and they're only going to have so many ideas or so many different playstyles, builds, what they think is perfect, whatever. They're never going to be able to compete with the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of games that are going to be played on the live servers across the entire world, where people are going to be able to gather more information about matchups, builds, runes, what's strong about the champion, what's good about the champion, what's bad about the champion, matchups, everything. And then that's always where you're going to get the clearest picture. You can have as good a playtesting as you want. It's never going to compare to the champion hitting the live servers, hitting the ranked servers, and that that data that you're going to get from that is where you're going to be able to learn and then really nerf and buff the champion over time. But then again, champions that are high skill cap, that have high skill mastery and take weeks, months, whatever to really perfect for a large portion of the player base, their numbers are always going to be skewed, and the numbers are always only going to tell part of the tale. But again, Samira was obviously way busted on launch. She got some of the biggest hot patch nerfs that we've ever seen. So that's even Riot admitting that she was way too strong. She was a mess. So it just seems kind of weird that people would be defending this so hard, especially with like attacks against people calling them out when they were clearly in the wrong, and something clearly broke down in the chain of playtesting and champion design and all that. And it made a lot of people angry. It felt really terrible to play against. It ruined a lot of people's experiences. But again, in a couple weeks, we'll totally forget about the situation. But I did want to respond to EnderCasts because he does have a big voice in the community, and he did say a lot of weird things, but he said a lot of good things as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video today, guys. Definitely drop a like if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below. What do you think about EnderCast comments? What do you think about the release of Samira? What do you think about the release of champions in general going forward? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. Subscribe to update on the latest content. Hopefully I catch you guys in the next one. But until then, peace.